Well, hello, hello.
Well, hello, hello from
Well,
Australia to the United States.
that's it. That's it. And welcome back to Let's Talk. I'm Leanne.
And I'm Jason, and this is Let's Talk.
So this is the space where no topic is off limits. We'll be covering things from well-being to resilience, leadership, money, relationships, mindset, and so much more.
And here at Let's Talk, as always, we bring the different perspectives, whether it's Leanne and I's perspectives or special guest perspectives, real stories, and honest conversations. Because the things that we don't talk about that often actually really are the things that matter most.
Yeah. So to have those conversations, to bring things to life, our goal here is simple. It really is to spark new ideas, to shift mindsets, and to give you practical tools that you can use in your leadership and your life. So,
Yes.
welcome back to our session today of Let's Talk. We're in series three, The Art of Intentional Living. And we've been kind of going over this for the last few weeks. So, what we've covered so far is why we don't act on what we know we should be doing, right? Like that knowing doing gap, and why it shows up for all of us. We then looked at the power of clarity and getting really clear with your vision and your mission and your purpose. And we've looked at living in alignment with our values and making sure that we're kind of really living into what we should be. And today we're talking about something that underpins all of it. And we have kind of had a conversation around this before in our previous series. But we're double clicking today because it is the foundation piece, right? That underpins everything. And that is your energy. Because most people try to manage their time without ever looking at managing their energy. And we don't need more time. We actually need better energy. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today, Jason.
Yes, me too. And I just think there's so much richness in today's conversation because there's a lot of myths, right, that go around productivity. And it kind of brings back some of these myths that I'll be going over, and what we've all been taught, right? um and it kind of brings up some, I don't know, also almost some triggers a little bit for me, right? Because, just thinking of different leaders who I've reported to over the years. I mean, some amazing, some so amazing, and then others, great learning experiences, but I could have done without, right? But we all have our pasts.
Yeah,
And
that we do.
and so in this realm of productivity myths, we've all been taught manage your time, be more efficient, get more done, right? I mean, who hasn't heard that? I'm sure, Leanne, I mean, I know you've been an entrepreneur for many, many years, but I'm sure that you've heard those myths of what you've been taught over the years.
Totally. And because of the programming, I do that to myself.
Mhm.
Sometimes like we get caught in that kind of loop of, oh, this is what I've been taught. This is the programming that's come in. You've got to do more, hustle more, spend more energy. And it has not served me so well sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. I get caught in that loop too of like kind of, I guess, lack of a better word, self-sabotage, in that of like, I'm like,
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah.
um so when individuals hear this, right, um yes, a lot of those, what we've been taught, have shown up right in our professional lives, but they also show up in our personal lives too, right? But when we're taught those things, people become exhausted, right? And they become overwhelmed and feeling constantly behind. And then there's that loop of like self scolding yourself,
Mhm.
of like, oh, yes, I should have got more done. I should have managed my time better, and blah, 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 blah. And then you get in those, I always refer to the hamster wheels, right? So, but the truth bomb around this is that the time is fixed, but the energy is not, right? Right. Because I mean, energy is a whole different thing than time. And so, yeah, your time might be fixed, but your energy may be not. So you might not be having that winning your day over. You may have won it from a time box standpoint, but not an energy standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I often share that with leaders is that, we can be working 100 hours a week doing something that we love, that's energizes us and not feel tired. And then we can be doing something that we don't enjoy or that zaps our energy, and we can be exhausted after 3 hours, right?
yeah,
So, this
yeah,
idea that time is fixed, but energy is not, it's really an interesting conversation.
yeah. Yeah, because like I mean, within that, I mean, you can have 8 hours and just be totally exhausted, with low input, but then you can have 2 hours and be fully energized and in alignment, and you can be creating high impact for yourself and for whatever you're working on.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we often talk about burnout, and burnout, the myth around burnout specifically is that it's because of overwork, but it's actually not. It's actually about not living in alignment, not feeling in control of my life, and not being recognized and rewarded for the effort that I put in. So even the myth around burnout is very interesting because most people think, oh my God, I've got no energy, I'm burnt out because I'm working too many hours. But that's not the case, because
Mm-hmm.
if we're doing the things that we love, the hours don't actually matter. It's the energy
Yeah,
that comes in. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about the neuroscience behind it, Leanne?
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. I think it's an important conversation because for us to understand what's happening in our body, we've got to kind of look at the neuroscience and the emotional intelligence in relation to our nervous system. Because the truth is that our nervous system drives our performance. We can operate in a state of regulated, calm, focused kind of energy, or we can operate in a state of stressed, fight or flight kind of energy. Or we can operate from that shutdown, freeze, burnout. Oh my God, there's too much going on. And
Yeah,
depending on what energy we're working from will depend on the output that we can put into the world, the state that we're in at any particular time. And that really makes a difference, right? Because you want great output, you want to be inspired, you want to be energized. So, really, if we think about it from a nervous system point of view, that's the first
mm-hmm.
step. Like, where am I? What kind of energy am I bringing in? Where am I sitting in my body, right? So, that's step number one when it comes to the neuroscience. The other thing I think to consider is that stress itself isn't the problem. A little bit of stress is actually good. It gets us moving. But
Mm-hmm.
chronic stress is an issue because it kind of impacts the way our brain works, the way our body works. It impacts everything. So if we've got short bursts of stress, and they call it eustress, right? It's that positive stress. It actually improves our performance. It actually gets us into action. It actually motivates us to do something. It's why many people do very well the night before a deadline, right? Because they get
Right.
that energy of stress that comes in, and then they perform really well and they get what they need to get done. But if we're under constant pressure, if we're under constant chronic stress, that actually depletes our energy because our body is kind of fighting in fight, flight, or freeze. So we're not able to do our cognitive work so well. And people are then trying to perform from that dysregulated state, which is actually harder work because our body is not in alignment. And a dysregulated nervous system cannot sustain high performance. It just can't.
Yeah.
So the onus is really on us to navigate that.
Yeah.
Um, and, most people wear stress as a badge of honor, but it's actually not ideal. A little bit of stress, healthy levels, great. But if it
Yeah.
kind of tips over, the brain can't function well with that. Do you want to say anything to that before I move on to the next one?
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of like when you were talking through that, Leanne, like, right, like those little bursts of stress can actually help you, right? So, like having a performance background, and I know you have some family members with performing backgrounds, that little bit of stress, like right before a performance or that nervousness that comes in, it's actually amazing on how much it helps to focus the mind,
Yeah,
like in the moment, right?
correct.
um and so, yeah, I just wanted to mention that from a performing arts background,
Yeah,
that those little of stress of like, but being able to focus that right in the right direction to have that help you show up as the best performer you can on stage.
yeah.
um
And
you
it's
know
a,
versus
sorry, go on.
versus having it get you all like, what's the word I'm looking for, like flustered and all that. So like when I think of myself as a younger performer to when I perform now, like my focus is different because I um focus my stress and my nervousness differently
Yeah,
from an awareness standpoint
yeah,
than how I used to.
yeah. And I was just going to share my experience. When I first started public speaking, my brain would turn off because I would be in a fight, flight, right? My mouth would go dry. I wouldn't be able to think well. But these days, because I can regulate myself, that
Yeah.
stress motivates me. It makes sure I'm sharp and focused, but it no longer creates that threat in my body, right? So I can
Yeah.
actually think clearly. And so that's interesting because, and to that point, Jason, the brain actually needs cycles. Like it needs a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of stress, it needs a little bit of rest, it needs a little bit of focus. Like we need cycles. We can't be in that high stress state all the time because
Yeah.
our output will be uh, affected because of that. So focus, rest, reset, focus, rest, reset is actually a good thing. But for the majority of people, you see in the workplace these days, it's like push, push, hustle, hustle, crash. And that's not healthy. That affects our capacity, it affects our output, but it certainly affects our innovation, our collaboration, like all the
Yeah.
things that we need to do in order to thrive gets affected when we're in this push, push kind of hustle, hustle, crash mode. So the real skill is to focus and then rest and reset and then focus and rest and reset. And if you can get into a cycle of allowance, because I think the
Mm-hmm.
rest and reset needs allowance. Like, I don't know about for you, but I was one of these that had to just keep pushing through, pushing through. I didn't give myself permission to rest or reset.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas these days, it's actually one of my priorities.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's like when you have those priorities and you set boundaries around them, right? I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, it might be. I mean, if it's a newer priority that you're like, okay, this is a newer priority that I'm really going to focus on, it might be uncomfortable for some people at the beginning, right? But it's a behavior change. It's a new pattern. They'll eventually adapt to it
Yeah.
over time, but it may be put them in a state of discomfort of like, oh, like Leanne's really holding her boundary on this, and you know,
Yeah.
I
And,
guess what does Brene Brown call them? The non-negotiables.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And you need to have them for your own well-being, right?
yeah.
And again, allowance. Like I keep coming up with this word because I often will ask people, what's it going to take for you to allow yourself to do that? And
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like a brain snap. It's like, oh God, I've been, work, work, push, push, push. That's what our society has kind of uh, enforced upon us, and it's not
Yeah,
healthy.
yeah. Absolutely. So now, I think it would be a great time to kind of move into this energy versus time conversation, right?
Mm,
So, you know, and I kind of relate some of this to like kind of traditional leadership type of styles, right? Like, time management says fill your calendar, Like I remember watching, I think it's probably advertised uh, on social media there. It's called Masterclass.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I remember one of the guest speakers, I forget which category it is was in, but it was the former CEO of Pepsi Cola.
Hmm.
And I remember her making a statement saying she was like, I always felt like for a while that in order to be successful, I had to have a full calendar,
Yep.
right? Because there's the imagery, right? Of like, oh, if somebody looks at my calendar, it's all the way full. That must mean I am successful, that I am, this busy, hardworking executive and blah, 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 right? But where it's really like, and I go to this of like, how do you manage your attention, right? That attention management around tasks and to dos and meetings and all that kind of stuff versus like, I have to have a full calendar every single day, because that is not sustainable in the long term. Um, and I can even say that from experience working with different people at organizations where it was like they hardly had time to go use the restroom and they got burnt out.
Totally. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I often will say to people is actually factor in oh shit time into your calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Like because things will fall off the rails. And then if you've got back to back and then you're in high stress because you've got somewhere else to be and you can't solve this problem. So I often will say to people, factor in some oh shit time. It's that time
Yeah.
for, and if you don't need it for the old shit stuff, then you've got a little bit of a rest. You've got a break. You've got, I can
Right.
go and actually get some fresh air or sunshine or a glass of water or to go to the toilet or whatever the case
Yeah.
may be.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. Oh shit time. Um, so that's where what time is saying, right? That traditional time management. But what energy management says is that align your tasks that you're doing with your state, right? I remember Leanne when I was going through the brain-based coaching program, and I believe it was part two that you were facilitating when, where it was where we were talking about like the different levels of thinking, right? Like level one, level two, level three, right? And like level one is like the mundane tasks, but like some people's level three thinking, which is that creative, like my older sister, morning. Morning is her time to be creative, get things done. Her level one is like mid to late afternoon. Where me, I'm the opposite. It's like, okay, like, do I have to align some of those more difficult tasks or creative tasks earlier? Sometimes, yeah, just sometimes what it is, right? But if I am the designer of my day and my calendar, like I put that stuff later in the day because I'm aligning with my energy state that I am so self-aware of now
Yeah.
versus like, okay, I got to put this creative project at 9 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, you'll probably get something out of me, but you're going to get something way better at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. And I think traditional thinking around that is that people get their best work done in the morning, right? But I know for me, that's not necessarily my greatest state either. Like I can do some good stuff in the morning, but I also can be very creative very late in the evening. So as opposed to,
As we
coming
both
in,
know, when it's like 1 o'clock in the morning here and we're working.
yeah, yeah. And the same for me, it's very late at night or whatever, and we're working. But that works for me, but it doesn't work for everybody. And our traditional calendars kind of are like come in, check your emails, and you waste a lot of energy doing stuff potentially that you should be saving to do those highly creative tasks. And so by the time you get to those tasks, you're already depleted your neural pathways. So if you can watch where your energy peaks and troughs, and then plan your tasks for that. When I'm high energy, I do that level 3 creative thinking. And when I've got low energy in the day, like after lunch, that's when I check my emails because for me,
Right.
you know, I don't have to think too much about that. It's not such an onerous thing. And then when my energy peaks again, then I do more creative. So you've really got to monitor yourself, right? Self-awareness is the key there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, most people, what's interesting, end up doing the opposite. And then they really tend to ask themselves in that hamster wheel, like, why am I always exhausted?
Mm,
Why am I always depleted? Why am I always, right? Where it's like they have to stop asking, what do I have time for? More versus replacing that question with, what do I have energy for?
yeah,
And I would even take that at a step further to say, what do I have energy for? If you have enough self-awareness to know kind of when your peaks and ebbs and flows are, like, what do I have energy for at 2 o'clock in the afternoon?
yeah,
Or what do I have energy for on a Tuesday versus on a Friday?
yeah, yeah,
Right? Because if you line yourself to that energy, you actually, and I would tend that you would agree with me on this, Leanne, that you actually get more shit done.
yep, totally. And again, like I try and encourage people for energy's sake, factor in a few minutes every hour to get up from your desk, go and have a glass of water, actually move. Sitting at your desk for hours trying to get stuff done feels like it's the right thing to do. But
Mm-hmm.
if you actually walked away from your desk for a few minutes and then came back, your energy level, you get more done in quicker time with less stress. So it's really, yeah, it's an
Yeah.
interesting conversation, but most workplaces don't understand this.
No.
And they don't teach us this stuff at school. So it's up to us to learn as we go, right? Like we've got our training wheels on through this thing called life. And we're kind of
Yeah.
going, oh, this actually, and because of neuroscience, because they can watch what's happening in the brain these days, we have much more awareness around this. Um,
Yeah.
and I think it's
Well,
important.
yeah. And I think that when you look at kind of generations, right? Like you and I are both Gen X, which were known as the bridge generation, right? From boomers to millennials, and now whatever generation they're on, alpha, whatever. But because, and I think that we have some magic because we grew up in both an analogical world and a digital world.
Yeah.
We grew up with traditional leadership, which used to be the status quo in organizations, to transformational, shared, et cetera, et cetera. So I think our generation has some importance here to be able, from an organization standpoint, whether they're leaders, teams, individuals, to really help bring in this subject matter, and to whether it's through a talk or a facilitation, a workshop, whatever. Like, I think, not saying that younger generations can't do it, but I think we are closer to the both and of what used to be to more of the modern business world.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowledge is power, right? And I think you're right. We are the torch bearers almost from the transition piece, and highlighting the best of both worlds, because I think
Yeah.
there's some good in both, right? Um, and let's face it, some of us leak energy without even being aware of it. And there's hidden things that happen that actually drain our energy that we're doing to ourselves without even considering. And some of it is thrust upon us by organizations, but a lot of it is our own internal mechanisms. And some of the things that show up is this whole idea of overcommitment, like this full schedule, this, I've got to say yes to everything without actually checking my energy and how do I actually feel about this. So we overcommit to people, places, things without, thinking about it and actually checking in, which comes from the next thing, which is that people pleasing, right? I want to be liked. I don't want to say no. And it feels uncomfortable, to do that because we're not clear on our boundaries, or we
Right.
don't have any boundaries at all. And boundaries are, I think we've talked about boundaries almost in every session
I
because
think we have.
because it's not something that's taught to us officially, and we're supposed to just get it. But for most people as children, their boundaries have been violated. Like parents tell you what to do. You might say no as a kid, and somebody goes, well, you just got to do it anyway. So we've been kind of taught for our whole life that, the way I feel actually doesn't matter so much. And okay, if it's better for everyone else, let's just let it happen. But it's actually not good. We have to have very clear boundaries, especially around our energy, because it's the only resource we really have. Um, if our energy is depleted, everything gets depleted. It really does.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can also be unclear in our priorities. Like, we talked about this a bit last week. Like, if you're not clear on your values and you don't have clarity around your vision, then your priorities are going to be wishy-washy, right? And that also is an energy leak because we're giving energy and attention to things that actually don't matter instead of the things that actually do matter. And the things that do matter usually light us up. They're the things that kind of spark joy. But we give our time and energy to things that we should be doing, we think, even though it may not necessarily be, we're doing busy work because of the unclear priorities. The other one that stands out, obviously, also is this emotional suppression. If we're not regulating ourselves properly and we're kind of suppressing our emotions, that's energy intensive, pushing
Mhm.
down, pushing down, pushing down, and eventually it will erupt and we end up doing things that we don't necessarily like or saying things that we regret later. Because suppression can only work for a short period of time before we actually explode. And it's not healthy either. And it takes energy to suppress. It's less energy to work through something than it is to actually suppress emotions.
Yeah.
Um, and, Jason, you can talk to this. I mean, you're doing a whole thing on emotional intelligence at the moment. But I think that one people don't even realize, if I'm suppressing, 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 it's so fatiguing. It zaps energy out of us. And you kind of fall onto the lounge at the end of the day, you can barely keep your eyes open. And it's not because of physical work, it's the emotional residue of suppression.
Yeah.
And the last one that we can talk about that we're all aware of is this digital overload. Like, we have information, we're consumers of information. It's coming in left, right, and center. And we don't really have a way of siphoning that out or deciphering or stopping. It's just constant consumption of information. And then how do we process that? And
Mhm.
especially in the climate that we have now, where a lot of the information that's coming in is highly emotionally charged. It's got a lot of fear in it. There's a lot of concern about what's happening in the world. So you've got this digital stuff coming in, and how are we navigating that? Like, it's very, very difficult to do. So the truth is, it's not always what we're doing, it's what we're carrying that actually saps our energy. It's not that we're physically working out, it's that we're carrying this load of um, heavy stuff on our shoulders and in our system. So,
Mhm.
as I said earlier, we don't burn out from doing too much. We burn out from doing too much that's not aligned, or um, if we're not lit, if we're doing things that don't actually speak to our soul, if that alignment piece isn't there, then burnout feels like it's everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you were talking about the common drains, right? Um, like the two I was like on was and I think this is from when I worked internally at some different organization, is the constant people pleasing
Mm-hmm.
from um not not necessarily from like a peer to peer. I mean, sometimes yes, but when I reflect on it, it was always so much more from a where whatever position I had to leadership,
Yeah.
right? Which often kind of put me in a space of lack of boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because especially if you're at like that kind of sweet spot in your career, I mean, you're looking at, okay, like where's, what's my next progression, my next promotion? How do I move up the ladder? Whether it's move up to a certain state and then move on to another organization, whatever whatever the puzzle looks like for
Pieces
you,
are.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like and it's interesting because a lot of times like I had very clear priorities, but I let that people pleasing piece in me, I think, cloud too much of my judgment at times.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. And it's interesting because you say that, Jason. And I remember a leader that I worked for once said to me, I find it really interesting with you, Leanne, that it's like a vacuum. You know, you get pushed in at 9 a.m. and you get sucked out at 5 a.m. or 5 p.m., right? And there's nothing more. And I remembered thinking that's because in my previous role, I would get in at 5 or 6 in the morning and not leave till 7 or 8 at night. And that was not good. So you so you've got to find your balance within that. And I found that just because I was working later didn't necessarily mean I got more done, but it felt better to be doing that, the people pleasing, you know?
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. Well, and like I remember in a role that I had, and I think like just kind of our team fell into it, right? Because it was such a busy environment. And it was like this thing of like, well, do I want to wake up to 80 to 100 emails? Right? Because there was a lot of I mean, it was higher education. So a lot of people worked, like a lot of faculty worked at night, right? And a lot
mhm.
of alumni worked at night. And so it was like, well, do you want to wake up to 100 emails or do you want to kind of manage your emails until you go to bed? Right.
Yeah,
So you're never off,
yeah.
you know? Um, and, like I know that that was part of lack of boundaries for me and a bit of people pleasing.
Mhm.
you know there was also commitment in there, right?
Yeah,
But was I committing kind of how I was maneuvering through the day in alignment to the energy that I had versus to this is going to look good?
yeah. And, sometimes as leaders, we have to think about this because if we send an email at 9 p.m. to our team, they're going to feel the need to respond,
Yes.
so by all means, type the email, but don't hit send until the morning. Like
Or
we have to,
schedule it.
or schedule it. Like we can lead by example, but if we as leaders are doing that, then our people feel the need to do that, and that's not the sort of leadership we want to be instilling. It's not the sort of
Yeah.
environment that's conducive to good work. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Absolutely. So within all that, we manage our energy, right? So that we have that sense of winning our day without being burnout, right? Because I think honestly, like to this week's conversation, like I think people want that. Like I think like whether you're in a C-suite executive to you know the janitor, like you know I think people want to be able to have a feeling of like I've won my day without exhausting all my energy, so
mhm.
that I have time for friends, family, whatever it may be outside of the given work hours.
Yeah.
So what are some practical things that we can do, right? And that's one thing that Leanne and I always love is we always love to give the practicality. Like, let's just get to the brass tacks where the rubber meets the road, right?
Mhm.
And we've talked about this several times. I think you were talking about it in the neuroscience section for today's conversation. Is that you got to regulate first, then perform second,
Yeah.
right? So what does that mean? Well, three easy things. Breathe, but make sure you're doing deep breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth so that you can get that deep breath and you can help regulate that nervous system, right? Pause. You don't have to pause for 5 minutes. You can pause for 30 seconds, right? And sometimes pause can just be reflecting or visioning, whatever works for you, and then reset. So, and sometimes that pausing can actually be setting the intention, setting the strategy.
Yeah.
for whatever you're going into, right? Whether you're going into a very difficult meeting or to a difficult conversation or just a long day, right? Where it's just like where you might have to self-regulate several times throughout the day, right?
Yeah. And I'll often say to people, like, physically get up and shake your body, you know, like
Yeah.
get the ick out, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're dysregulated,
Yeah.
which is part of that reset. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, and I know you would 110% agree with this, Leanne, is that, especially if a meeting or a day-long retreat or half whatever, if they have a facilitator, a good facilitator will do that. A good facilitator will be mindful about the regulation for self and team,
mm,
you know. And I have seen some bad facilitators and have been a part of meetings that have had very bad facilitators who don't look at that whole body, whole person neuroscience experience, right? Um, Also, a second practical thing that you can do is work in cycles, not marathons. And I know in neuroscience, it talks a lot, and we've talked about this too, is, chunking work, right? So chunk your work into small cycles versus like, I have to sit here for 4 hours before I can take a break to do ABC and da, 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 which is super exhausting, not good for the brain. And it's not good for your energy level. And within that, and those can be 20 minutes or 60 to 90-minute cycles, right? Um, Take short breaks, get up, shake it off, do that self-regulate within those breaks. Go out for some fresh air, get some coffee, tea, Celsius, whatever.
water.
Water, yes, water. um, to hydrate yourself. And reset your nervous system. And resetting your nervous system can be through that self-regulation that I just talked about, right? Because when you reset or when you work in these small cycles, you're actually conserving your energy and re-energizing yourself for the next small cycle.
Yeah, we need to manage our state before we can manage our strategy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then, which I love that you said that, because it actually goes into the next practicality of matching your task to your energy, right? So, I mean, if I have control over the design of my day, yeah, I'm not going to put super creative, deep thinking tasks within the morning. It's just not my sweet spot of creative time, right? But I'll match the tasks that do work within that level of thinking for myself, right? Um, because what you want to do with this is protect your peak energy for what matters most,
Yeah.
right? And the mundane stuff, and even sometimes within the mundane stuff, which could be checking your emails. Sometimes there's a few emails that require that level 3 thinking.
Yeah.
So develop a system for yourself to go back and, like, all email systems now have great, systems to flag and to say, what, that's a 2 or 3 o'clock PM thing. And I get it. Sometimes there's deadlines to emails where you just gonna have to kind of muster through it. But if you can match your energy to your task, or match your task to your energy and do it a little bit later, awesome. We all get it that there's times where you can't do that. But for the majority of the time, that's going to work best for folks. And then, just like Leanne was talking a little bit earlier, is set boundaries that protect your energy. One of my biggest ahas in my adult life was learning to say no
Mm-hmm.
to make my yes more powerful.
Yeah. And to actually realize that no is a complete sentence. I don't have
Yep.
to give you a whole lot of stuff around that. It's just like, no.
No. And you're not getting a dissertation out of me of the why I said no. Right. And then secondly, um, reduce overload, right? And sometimes reducing overload takes, and this is sometimes where personal and professional life overlaps. Sometimes the overload is in your personal life, and you need to take a look at that, you know? So within all this, I don't want folks to super compartmentalize that, personal life never flows into professional life or vice versa, because they do. And I think this is a perfect example of overload, because sometimes you may have all these stressors that nobody knows about, but how can you manage them, or how can you give um, or how can you change your strategy to what attention you give to them? Is there resources within your personal network, friends or family, that can help take that overload a little bit? Some of the
And
things.
also the other way around, right? If you're completely overloaded in the workplace, the impact in your personal life to your family, your friends is extreme. So I think that one goes both ways, because the truth is we're whole, complete people.
Yeah.
We can't leave our emotions at the door. They're part of us. We can't leave the stresses at the door. It's kind of part of us. So we need to
Mm-hmm.
learn how to navigate
Yeah.
to reduce them, but to also be aware of, oh my goodness, I'm not at my best today because my kids were sick last night. I didn't sleep. Of course, that's going to have an impact. Um, and as human beings, we have to have some, again, self-compassion around this, but also some
Mm-hmm.
self-awareness so we can navigate it.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think um, in the workplace, a good leader will always do a quick check-in at the beginning of a meeting, even if it's a one-word check-in. Stoplight, red, yellow, green, where are you at? And if 50, if a good percentage of your room is at a red, that might be a signal for a leader to be like, hey, I need to pivot a little bit here. Yeah. And then simplify commitments. And I think we kind of talked about that, right? And the strategies around how you can do that. And that's looking at what are your resources to help you simplify them. And where do you need to say no in those commitments, right? Or, you know, another analogy that I like to use, like, what needs to be on the front burner and what needs to be on the back burner of the stove, because everything is not a priority.
No, and just because it's somebody else's priority, they'll try and enforce it to be your priority. And having that conversation or sometimes around, well, I've actually got this, and you're kind of trying
Yeah.
to make me do that. If I, what's more important, and to be able to have that.
Yeah. And I see that a lot, like in organizations, Leanne, of like service organization or like service departments, like departments that may not actually make the money for the organization, but they provide the aid, all the other stuff. And what I see as a pattern is a lot of times those departments become yes departments, because they always want to show they're on top of it, they're providing, they're doing A, B, and C, because they don't want to be cut. They don't want to be cut out of the budget, right? But
It's interesting that one, Jason, also, because I remember doing this program years ago, and they talked about red, blue, black. Red is
mhm,
cost center stuff. So it is the administrative tasks that don't generate income, but are needed for the flow of information, right? Very important, but it's not income producing. Then we've got the blue, which is the strategic thinking, which is kind of high in the sky and working on the business rather than in it. And the black
mhm,
is kind of what generates the income. It's the sales, it's the churn of income coming in. And what I have come to realize is that most entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, I will say solopreneurs, um, or new self-employeds will spend 90% of their time doing the red stuff and maybe 5% of time doing the blue and black, like the strategy and the sales, right? But they're busy doing busy work, but it's not necessarily stuff that's generating an income. And then that creates a stress as well. So I think, we need to be mindful of what work we're doing. As we've
Hmm.
said many times today, is it in alignment? Is it the right work that we should be, or are we just kind of doing busy work because that's our programming to be busy all the time?
Yeah. 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 I haven't ever heard of the red, blue, black before.
It's pretty cool. I remember when it was taught to me, I was just like, oh shit, I am spending most of my time in the red doing, and that's not where my time is best spent. Like my time was best spent in the face to face and the building relationships and the rest
Yeah.
of it. And I don't like doing the red, and I'm not great at doing the red.
Right.
And but I was doing it because it was busy work.
Right.
Right. And then
Right.
I ended up really realigning my business and putting somebody on to do a lot of the red stuff, um, because it needed to be done. It's not that it doesn't need to be done, but it just didn't need to be done by me.
Right. Exactly. And that's where a lot of solopreneurs, I think, get caught up, not saying doing the wrong things, but where they're aligning their energy to, right? It's like, um, I don't know, some professional out there that helps like entrepreneurs and businesses and all this kind of stuff. She has a lot of ads on social media, but where she talks about, for so many years I was an operator within my own business, right? Basically red, right? But it took, but she never really gave what the magic sauce was. I get it, because that's the tie-in, right? To the blue
Yeah.
and the black,
Yeah,
right? And it is interesting. A lot of solopreneurs, because I see this in my own self sometimes. I catch myself so much in the red, but it's like,
totally.
oh, wait a minute. Like,
I actually did it on Monday. I was sitting there and I was working on something and pulling it apart and trying to resolve it. And then I just kind of caught myself, after 2 hours, mind you, not like I was doing the hamster wheel for 2 hours. And then I laughed at myself and thought, you've actually got somebody that you pay to outsource this to. What are you doing?
yeah,
It's like,
totally.
so I
Totally.
was like, hey, this blah 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 blah. This is what I've done. This is what I need from you. Thanks heaps. And I was handed it off. But 2 hours is, the grind before it kind of
Yeah.
dawned on me. Oh God, you've done it again. You're in the red.
Done it again, Leanne.
So,
Totally. So, to kind of finish out this section, um, what we want to do is, we want to, if you think of it almost kind of like a bank account, right? You want to build your bank account, you just don't want to spend it, right? So it's always on empty, right? So what does that take? What is required to build your energy source? Because whether it's your personal life, your professional life, everything in between, you're a human and you're the one that chooses, because nobody else can do it for you. Like your leader in your organization cannot build your energy. They cannot sleep for you. They cannot movement for you. They can not nutrition you. They can provide the food at like a luncheon or whatever, so they can help in the nutrition part, but you got to choose what you choose to put into your body, right? From a food consumption point and hydration standpoint, and then recovery. What does recovery look like? Does that look like just kind of laying around being lazy at home, or does that mean you're kind of out, with like your best friend having a cup of coffee or taking a walk in nature or vacation, whatever recovery looks like for you. So build your energy, build your bank account, just don't spend it and not take the right strategies to build it back up so that you can have those nice times when you can spend your energy.
yeah.
Um, so energy management is self leadership, and self leadership is on both ends of the teeter totter and everywhere in the middle too.
Yeah. We can't rely on other people to do this for us. This is, as we say often, this is an inside job.
Yep.
And in order for us to show up as our best selves, we have to manage our energy in every aspect all the time. So it's so important. So from here, I really want to ask you to think about, where are you currently depleted? Like, is there a particular area? Is there a particular task? Where are you feeling depleted currently? And what is it that's draining you that you haven't actually addressed? Or what are you going to start reflecting on now so you could possibly address it if you haven't thought about it before? Because we can't measure we can't manage what we can't measure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have that self-awareness. We need to really look at what is draining me? What do I need to address here? And what would change if you prioritized your energy this week? Like if you actually focus on it and think about it and made that your priority, what would change? What would your output be like? What would you feel like in your body because you're doing the good work, right?
Yeah. One thing comes to mind, Leanne, when you
Yep.
say that. I think one thing that would improve would be what we talked about in this first episode of this series is the knowing doing gap.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for me too. If I was full energy, I would just eat the frog, do the hard tasks that I procrastinate on because I don't have the energy to do it because I've depleted my energy because I'm not managing so many other things. So the truth here is that it's not about doing less. That's not what we're trying to say, but it's about doing what matters better, right? And that's really the takeaway from our conversation today, because we've all got multiple things that we're juggling, but we can be in charge of what matters most and then what energy can I bring to that, and that is up to us at any particular point.
Absolutely. Perfectly said. So with that, I think we're ready to move into, I can't believe how fast this conversation went today. But definitely had a lot of goodies in it. But I think we're ready for our top 3 takeaways.
I think we are.
Okay. Okay, so before we go into today's top 3 conversation takeaways, obviously, like we said, we're in series 3 of season 1, The Art of Intentional Living, episode 25, which runs through middle of June. Today's conversation and the top 3 takeaways. So the first takeaway today is energy, not time, is your most valuable resource. So it's that reframing your thinking. And I like this is, reframing it from a clock to a battery. Where's your battery at? Nobody likes a low battery on their phone.
Oh God, no. We don't let our batteries get low on our phone, and yet we let our internal battery get low, right? And depleted.
Absolutely. So we don't let our digital batteries. I think that's such an amazing way to think about that. We don't let our digital batteries get low, but we let our human battery get low. Right. Secondly, our second top tip is your state determines your performance. Are you always on an uphill, like having to sit, and not taking breaks and not self-regulating and not, taking those small amounts of time throughout your day to rebuild your energy so that you can be in this state to actually perform the tasks that you want to match to that energy? And thirdly, sustainable success requires recovery, not constant effort. So that recovery part that I was talking about, what are your recovery strategies? There's not one formula that everyone has to live by when it comes to a recovery strategy. The recovery strategy has to work for you. I mean, we give you some tips and tricks and some tools, that you can grab from your toolbox, but you also have to align to what works for you, right? And so, like I love this visual. Stop just running on the treadmill at full speed with an uphill incline, but take some time to, whether it's sitting in a hammock or going to a coffee shop or just taking a walk and just getting some fresh air, right? Um, so yeah, so those are our top three tips. Anything else you want to add, Leanne, before we go into top resources?
I just want to say that this is how you stop just surviving your days and actually start directing them and leading them, right? By protecting your energy and in that then enhances your life, right? The
Yeah,
whole life changes. It's not just at work, like everything shifts. Um,
yeah,
so it goes from surviving to thriving.
yeah, yeah. Be that CEO of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. All right. So on to top books and resources.
So we've got a couple, as usual, of things to talk about here. The first one is the book of The Powerful Engagement by Jim Lower and Tony Schwartz. And this book kind of reframes performance by showing that energy, not time, is the foundation of effectiveness. So it kind of double clicks on what we've talked about today. It introduces the idea of managing your physical, your emotional, your mental, and your spiritual energy to sustain that high performance that you want to achieve without burnout. So it's a really great book to consider. If you haven't read it, I would kind of talk about that. The other one that's here is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And this is a deep dive into the science of sleep and its impact on your brain functionality, on your mood, and on your performance, and also on your emotions. So Walker shows how sleep is not a luxury, but a critical biological process that underpins everything from focus to decision making to your long-term health, physically and emotionally, right? So it really reinforces that energy starts with recovery, actually, not productivity hacks. If we're
Yeah,
not recovering well, the productivity hacks just aren't going to cut it anyway. And then the last one here is Rest by Alex Sujung Kim Pang, I think is how you pronounce the name. And this book challenges the idea that more work equals better results. It actually shows that deliberate breaks, deliberate rest, deliberate recovery actually enhances that creative capability. It enhances our performance and our sustainable success over a period of time. So again, another powerful reminder that rest isn't the opposite of work. It's actually part of it. And I just want to say that again, rest isn't the opposite of work. It's actually a part of it. And I don't necessarily think that we think of rest that way. We think of it as a luxury rather than a necessity.
yeah,
So I just wanted to speak to those. And then there's a couple of TED Talks. One is by Ariana Huffington around Get More Sleep. I remember listening to a story about where she literally fell asleep at a table and cut her face open or something, right? Because she was so sleep deprived. So definitely worth having a look at Ariana Huffington. And also the Puzzle of Motivation here by Dan Pink. Again, it's just useful things to think about, to think about and to plan about, because if we're not working on ourselves, if we're not resting, recovering, managing our energy, then our motivation wanes. And then
yeah.
the last one is Sleep, Energy and Focus by Andrew Huderman. So again, we'll put the links in so you can have a look at all of that, but there's our information for today. So
Yeah. And I believe, Leanne, that the books are both on hard copy Audible.
yes,
Okay.
yeah. Um, so I'd like to leave you before we sign out today, just with thinking about what is the one thing that's draining your energy right now that you know you need to change. Like, what's one thing? I'm sure there are multiple things, but that you know that you need to change. And then I encourage you to do something about that this week.
Awesome question. Okay, so next week's episode, episode 26. Can't believe we're almost to 30. It's just crazy to think about, and also exciting. But next week's episode is on systems over motivation, why discipline isn't the answer. So it's a nice little infographic here to kind of show the systems and the motivation discipline. And it's also going to be the last week of April already. Next
Wow.
week, April 29th, in the US at 4:30 Pacific time, and Thursday, April 30th in Sydney at 9:30 a.m. Australia Eastern Standard Time. And then as always, so we will have moved over to this column as a quick snapshot, and as well as the last four that will be end of May to June. So with that, I think we're ready for the closeout.
I think we are.
Okay. So as always, thank you for joining us for today's conversation on energy over everything, winning your day without burning out.
And as usual, we hope that it sparked something new, an insight, a fresh perspective, a new question, or something that's just worth shifting so you can show up as your energetic best, right? And some of those questions that might be worth exploring.
Exactly. And as always, here at Let's Talk, our mission is simple: to have the conversations that matter and to remind you that you don't have to figure out this thing called life and all of its complexities on your own. We are here to have conversations beside you and to help give you tips and tricks and some gold nuggets for your toolbox, to help you along the way as you navigate life and all these wonderful opportunities that it provides.
And the complexities that go with it. Absolutely. So, as usual, if you like today's episode, please like it, share it, subscribe, and keep the conversation going with us.
Because when we talk,
We really talk.
and anything is possible
So, let's talk
with real conversations.
and limitless possibilities. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.